So my memory of you as a leader was when we worked together to try to change the vision of the medical society and how to get there. What are your and what were your thoughts about that time?
Well, it was a tumultuous time, as I think I said, and a lot of good people doing what they thought was the right thing, but maybe didn't fit the times correctly, or fit the times well, I'll put it that way. And it required a great deal of cooperation among the leaders of the medical society, starting with Jack's predecessor, and who initially got going on the idea of the journal needed to move into the modern era. And through Jack's strong leadership of the Times, when that effort was underway, and then I had the privilege of having the good part of getting the new editor. And there were many things like that where, particularly in my year, which fell between Jack and Fran, I had enormous support, mentoring from Jack, and how he had thought through how to go about some of these things, and enormous help from Fran, who was following me and was tremendously supportive of what we were doing, and tremendously helpful as a sounding board. So I was in a very good position between two strong leaders, and got much of the fun and less of the grief than some of them did. And that's important to any society, to move forward by having groups of people who can work together, following one another, and sharing. One of the things that the medical society gave me an opportunity to do, and I think probably a lot of other people, was to do things that would never have occurred to me to volunteer for or to do without a lot of support. When Joe Heyman was president of the society, he asked me to chair a committee to revamp how the finances were handled at the medical society, and I said, you know, I was treasurer of my college sorority, but other than that, I know nothing about this stuff. I couldn't be a worse choice for you. And he answered, and I have found his sentiment to be true in picking people for other jobs in life, was the important thing is that the leader is somebody who can draw out everyone else's opinion and has no pre-existing prejudice about what the answer should be. And the fact that you don't feel that you know anything about it is one of the things that made me choose you to do this. Because everybody else on your committee is going to come into those meetings with a very strong idea of the right way to do it their way, and the wrong way to do it everybody else's way. And so that worked out very well, both as a way to make me think in the future, and in terms of having a great deal of pleasure out of running those meetings where everybody knew more than I did, and to sit there and draw things out. It was somewhat similar to the search for the editor in the New England Journal from that point of view.
How'd you find working with the staff?
Oh, I enjoyed working with staff. I didn't run into anybody that I found to be a major problem at all. People were very supportive, and in the rare instances in which there was a problem with somebody, not necessarily a personal one that I had with them, but in the way things were being done or needed to be improved, and they didn't see it that way, I found our PR person, Teresa Sciarappa, to be fabulous at taking a calm, cool, collected look at what was going on, having the quiet backup. She was another person who was a wonderful support from the point of view of the president. And have you thought about involving a lawyer, or have you thought about recommending this person go to a physician health committee or whatever? And all the staff were very supportive. Poor Frank Fortin getting up in the middle of the night practically to meet me in Cape Cod, or Cape Cod was close for him, well, let's say the Berkshires or whatever, and going with me to contentious meetings where I was speaking, as I'm sure you did, and people who followed me also did, to better business groups and what is it, the GMC, I can remember the name of the organization that runs the state healthcare,
GIC.
state employees healthcare, GMC?
GIC.
GIC, thank you, meetings, which I remember at one time when they were going on and on about how overpaid doctors were, getting up and going to the window of the room where the meeting was and looking out the window and say, see all those nice cars out there? Mm-hmm. See that 10-year-old Ford? That's my car. Don't know.
So you were having a very successful career
Right.
here in Massachusetts. Why did you ever consider becoming involved with the American Medical Association on the national scale?
Well, the more I did with the medical society, the Mass Medical Society, the more I came to see that many of the issues that came up at Mass Medical Society meetings, like issues about the environment or issues about what Medicare and Medicaid were doing, that would come up as possible additions to our compendium of what we stand for, really were national issues, not state issues. And I became more and more interested in how one can initiate positive change at a national level, and therefore it would seem like a natural fit to be interested in going and being on the AMA delegation. And I was strongly mentored. I remember particularly being mentored by Phil McCarthy, who at the time was head of our delegation, and who was very much involved with trying to make new members of the delegation feel comfortable and be part of the action and stand up and make suggestions on the floor of the House and so forth. And originally my primary interest at the AMA was in things that the Committee on Medical Services was interested in because they were related to everyday practice. And I was still practicing. I had a very big practice, and that consumed the vast majority of my time, not all these administrative things. So that was the sort of thing I was interested in at the AMA level. Then there were a number of years when, as you probably recall, I got into increasing problems with my own body and had all those hip surgeries and a cadaver graft, and fell and dislocated my shoulder and tore my biceps tendon, and pretty soon, like 4 or 5 years had gone by without me being active in practice because I physically couldn't. And I continued to be active by doing things like doing consulting and how to improve the quality of healthcare, taking jobs like, I worked for Blue Cross and Blue Shield as a consultant for a year and a half in Rhode Island, doing basically looking into patient complaints or concerns that arose at hospitals about what an internist might be doing in his office that was leading his patients to end up in the hospital more often, or concerns that came through the Rhode Island state government about patients who happened to be Blue Cross Blue Shield patients having problems with their hospitals who complained to the state or whatever. So I did that kind of consulting for a number of years and kept my hand in on what was current in medicine, because a lot of what I was doing was promulgating various ways that one should think about approaching various kinds of chronic diseases in order. Obviously, Blue Cross Blue Shield wanted to save money, being an insurance company, but also the deal was to try to improve quality of care, and that in itself, presumably in the long run, would save money, but it also, and much more importantly to me, enhanced the patient experience and the likelihood they were going to improve or get well under the doctor's care. So I was doing that kind of thing. And I felt like I no longer belonged at the AMA fighting for the issues of people who were in active practice, because those seats, but my strong feeling at the time, and still is, that once you do something, like being on the board of MMS or being on these committees at the AMA or whatever, there comes a time when you should move on and make room for younger people to take your spot. And so I resigned I didn't resign my AMA delegation seat. When it came time to stand for re-election, I did not stand for re-election, which is the equivalent of resigning, because I felt that it should be somebody younger who was fighting active practice issues every day. And then along came this committee on senior physicians, which at the time that I originally ran for it, it was an appointed commission. And a couple of people from Massachusetts approached me and asked me if I would be interested in being recommended to be on the Senior Physicians Committee at the AMA. I knew very little about it. It was just, at the time, it was sort of thought of as oh yes, the AMA Senior Physicians Group, they sponsor all those nice trips to Croatia or whatever after you're retired. And in fact, they did sponsor those trips, which was how they raised the funding for running the committee, which did not have the funding that sections do at the AMA, where they are funded for their meetings. So anyway, I thought that sounded interesting, and I got involved. And as usual, when I get involved in things, I want to move them on. so it became obvious, as it had to other people before me. It wasn't the first one who thought up the idea, but that if we were going to do something as a committee, we should do something on a broad scale and get involved in issues like, not just can everybody get together and have dinner once a year at the AMA meeting and feel good about being senior physicians and hear a speaker, but we should get involved with issues like, at what point does it make sense for senior physicians to be required to take tests that show that they're still competent, and other major controversial issues around senior physicians, which are rarely spoken of but are crucial to healthcare in our country. And that is competency, as I already said, because some people are very competent at 80 and some people shouldn't be practicing medicine at 63. And so how do you initiate this conversation? Because already some localities, some medical societies, some groups were starting to put pressure on the people in those societies or groups or states or whatever to come up with some answers to those questions. And so we undertook to come up with those answers that would be accepted nationally by bringing in speakers who had expertise in how you take a physician who's been out of practice for a long time, an issue with which I was very familiar by then. If they want to go back, if that person wants to go back and practice again, what do they have to do? What hoops should they have to jump through in order to do so? And we get very involved in that sort of thing, and as a group, and then other things that the group had already been doing, which was volunteer. They had encouraged the senior physicians group at the Medical Society had encouraged people to do volunteer work after they retired, but there was sort of no national compendium of who was doing it and where and what sort of things. So maybe in Worcester there may be two groups who were trying to do that, and in the whole state of Texas there might be none, or whatever. And so how you think nationally about that sort of stuff. So I get very involved with the senior physicians group, and at the end, before I also did not run for a seat when my time ran out, because by then I also had such heart problems that they became a major issue of getting around at the meetings. By then, we had gotten focused on making the senior physicians into a section of the medical, at the AMA, which gave them much better standing to initiate any kind of projects, because now you had the funding from the AMA supporting the projects you were working on. You didn't have to sell seats on the trip down the Danube to get there. So forth, and I gather it has moved on fairly successfully.
I remember the House of Delegates meeting,
Where it got voted
actually
in
when that
finally.
got voted in.
Yeah, I think you stood up and spoke for us.
I did,
Yeah, yeah, very definitely.
So Ginger, how do you think things have changed over your lifetime? You've been part of, obviously, a lot of change, but
Yes.
there's something really significant about all of this, and do you have any thoughts for the next generation of doctors going forward about the future?
No, but just generic thoughts, like obviously those, the shortest distance between any 2 points is a straight line, but the way to get from point A to point B most successfely involves lots of twists and turns and flexibility and understanding
So
that
it's
you
different than
can't.
astronomy.
Yes, exactly, very different from astronomy. Understanding that you have to give up on some things you're pushing for and move to other things to push for instead, or get at it a different way or whatever. And the flexibility to move and grow with the world around you, to accept and appreciate new technologies, new ways of doing things, and what have you.
So the future is the same in terms of navigation.
Yes,
Your life has been.
right.
Thank you for being such a wonderful role model.
Well, thank
Such a
you.
wonderful companion through all of this
Well,
journey.
Thank you for being such a gracious interviewer and for having been such a supportive person to me for decades. I appreciate every day that I've done things with you as well as today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Ginger, very much.